The very first thing that I'd like to do is to take you back in time. The year 2019. It's the year where COVID doesn't exist yet, and the world pandemic is not in our vocabulary. And the economy is doing great, and travel is really easy, and people like us, we can get whatever job we want. We're totally sought after, with our skills are needed everywhere. And someone has the echo on. Can I mute you, Tristan? Thanks. Cool. People like us are needed absolutely everywhere, and it's really easy to get a job. The world of work, times were really good too. Autonomy, mastery, purpose, winning all along. And leadership had changed too. We had moved from command and control to being more collaborative, to have adaptive leadership, even servant, even though I don't really like that word that much. And agility, taken off. Everyone wanted to be agile, everyone wanted to be adaptive, even the big corporations and banks had somehow gone on the journey. And the core of this were autonomous teams, autonomous people, which doesn't mean do whatever you like, but people in teams with agency and decision-making power. And then, boom, 2020, COVID happened. And we're all thrown into working from home, trying to keep our businesses alive, learning how to cope with totally changed circumstances. And it seems like a really, really, really long time ago, almost like a lifetime ago. And since then, many things have happened in the world. But it was the beginning, I think, of a change of trajectory in our ways of working. And I think that change has not been for the better. The direction we're going in is a loss of autonomy and agency. And in this talk, I'm going to tell you why I think so. But let me just state that I'm claiming that we are moving in the wrong direction here. What I want with this talk is start a conversation how we can get our ways of working back on track, what we need to do, what conversations we need to have, and how we need to behave. And just as a word of warning, don't expect me to come up with all the solutions, but do expect some insights and some perspectives. Also, at the end, I'm going to ask you for a favor, and I'm going to leave you with 3 concepts to take away and act on. So this is me, firstly. And I've been reflecting on how much has changed in my life since 2020. I spend 4 days of my life at the beach. I work in the city 3 days a week. My work is hybrid. I started surfing, still pretty shit at it, but I love it. And there's a recession, so I have a lot less client work. Don't know about you, but type in the chat maybe, like who is still working, who has changed how many days they work from the office? Who has moved? Maybe even moved city? Who's changed jobs? Who has lost their jobs and who's found a new one? Yeah, our lives have changed. And it's not just our physical setups that have changed. We changed. We're the first generation in the Western world for a really long time that has experienced collective change and trauma. And the world's not exactly a happy place at the moment. There are climate events, there are flooding and wildfires, there's inflation, there's recession, there's mass layoffs, even in technology. There's a fucking war in Israel and in Europe. And with technology, we don't know exactly what AI is going to do to our societies and our jobs. The change is huge. And we are different people in a different world. Our workplaces have changed. And what does it actually mean for our workplaces? What were the impacts and what were the impacts on the relationships on our workplaces. That's what I want to look into. Because while there has been a focus on experience and well-being of employees, there's been lots of happiness surveys. There's articles about workplace culture, about hybrid working. There hasn't been a lot of focus on leaders' experience and well-being. And I think both perspectives are equally important. And the leader's perspective has been totally underrepresented. So I'm going to address this imbalance and add some perspectives from leaders. So if you're wondering who this talk is actually for, I want to say it's for people. And some of us are leaders, some of us are people, most of us are both. Basically, if you have a boss, you're also people. But, so this talk is for everyone, I think. But because I'm not a leader, you follow me, it's your problem. Because I'm not a leader, I started interviewing leaders to get their perspective. And I got a broad range of leaders from different sectors and different countries, from New Zealand, from Australia, from the US, and from Europe. And I spread those, and they were spread from being CEOs to public servants, partners at the law firm, and product managers. So I got really diverse backgrounds and perspectives. And even though their backgrounds and perspectives were so diverse, they converged on very, very few main points. Basically, they're all saying the same, had the same observations. I'm going to share those with you now. And the number one thing that came up that every single one of them said was, people are fragile, they're fearful, and they're more self-absorbed than ever. And it's not just them saying this, it's not just observations. They're actually stats that back them up. New Zealand, and just going to put out there that New Zealand stats, we don't have anything since 2021. What we do know, and that Stats New Zealand, is that in 2018, 22% of New Zealanders reported poor mental well-being. In 2021, that number had risen to 28%. And a bit of a random 2022 number, St. John say they are seeing a spike in mental health calls. Healthline say they are seeing a spike too in mental health calls. So something's going on here. And I also looked into Australia because they seem to have better stats and are usually quite similar to us. There's a striking difference again, 2018 to 2023, people's anxiety. It's gone from 13% reporting anxiety to 17%. And also the fact that 42% have experienced some mental disorder sometimes in their life, I find really, really alarming. Same is going on all over the world, like OSCE and European Union have really good stats, and they all say the same thing. Mental health is on a decline. So it's not just our leaders observing this, it seems to be actually true. So what's going on here? Leaders saying that people are fragile, anxious, and struggling with life. I know some people just want to curl up in a ball and cry and not do anything. But what most people do, what most people end up with is they just want to be taught what to do if they feel anxiety. So what they're really saying is, I'm really stressed. I can't think. So just tell me what to do. And also people who are stressed are naturally inwards facing. They get self-absorbed. And that's a really bad space to be supposed to think freely and creatively. What our leaders tell us is that learned helplessness is just going through the roof. Everyone has observed people sitting back going, just I can't cope, tell me what to do. And I would even go further and say that we're talking about a demanding helplessness. People sitting back and demanding that leaders solve their problems. And they forget this is a two-way street. It's the opposite of autonomy and independence. And I think if we want to keep our autonomy and independence, we need to stop this learned helplessness. Let's unpack this a bit. And I don't know who of you is familiar with learned helplessness. I would assume some of you. But if you aren't, it's a psychological term coined by Dr. Martin Seligman in 1967. And I'll give you an example to explain what it is in psychology. Fundamentally, imagine you are going on a fitness and nutrition journey and you want to be really fit and have a really good body and feel great. And then on the way, you get started enthusiastically. On the way, you get like a number of setbacks. There's no visible progress. You hit a plateau. You get injuries. And despite of your best effort, it doesn't really work. So you start to believe that you're not really cut out to feel good, move well, look great. So you give up. And it's a form of learned helplessness because things happen to you that you think are out of your control, and you stop your own agency. At work, I've seen this. It's teams that work together, and every time they show management what they have created, they receive negative feedback. It's not right, you're too slow, the estimates are always wrong, and also we need something different. And they feel that the goalposts are just moving, and whatever they do, there's constant criticism. So they end up being demotivated, feeling powerless. And then people sit back and do the bare minimum because they know nothing they're going to do will make a difference. And that's the teams that I've seen that are being spoon-fed tickets. You go to stand-ups, you go to meetings, and you ask them, so what are you working on? It's like, well, Jira 27849. Like, great. You're not even thinking about what you're doing and why you're doing it. You're just working on a ticket. That's people who have given up and just want to be taught what to do. I go as a coach, I go to those totally lukewarm, unengaged, factory-like agile planning meetings where the team just sit there and they're waiting to be given stuff to do by a product owner. Just give me a user story in the form of a detailed spec, being told by the product owner exactly what to do. And they don't have an opinion, or they don't have a view of how things should be. They just want to sit there and be told what to code or what to test. And I see it in organizations, and I think this constant seeking for frameworks and for templates is a form of organizational learned helplessness. Talked to a product manager who I interviewed, and he said, well, it's remarkable the extent to which many people will go in order to avoid thinking. And I added this because if you're like me, you will sit here and think, well, yeah, that's all other people, because I'm not like this. I always think. And the product manager told me that people are very interested in ChatGPT, AI, co-pilots, and then they just take the response that comes back blindly without thinking, is it correct? Does it even make sense? Or is it even relevant? So there's a lot of people just sitting there waiting to be told, accepting what they are being told. And part of it, most likely, according to our leaders and according to our stats, comes from being in a state where we are anxious and can't really think. Why is it a problem? Because really, you might think that work is transactional. You do as you're being told, you deliver a piece of work, you get paid. Boom, done. But I don't think that we will be okay doing this. I don't think us personally or our organizations will be okay. Because we spent the last 20 years explaining to everyone that we're not factory workers, we are knowledge workers, we are creative. You can't tell us what to do. Stop telling us what to do, because we need to be free. We need to innovate. And in order to do that, we need to think freely and combine ideas from different fields. You need to trust us. So people who wait to be told what to do won't be very good at innovation or creativity. And leaders also tell me that people who don't think, who just go to, I'm anxious, I can't think, tell me what to do, they will just blindly accept any meeting request that comes in. They attend meetings without considering, should I even be here? There's a word for it, it's called meeting bloat. And leaders tell me that they see people go crazy with calendars full of meetings. People just show up to those meetings, say nothing, and they completely mistake presence for impact. And it's a waste of time, everyone's time and productivity. It's time that goes away from doing thinking work, real work, creative work. And I don't know, but I did an inventory and wondering, like, how many useless meetings am I actually going to? Well, it's quite a few. But I did have the assumption that I had to go. And it was quite changing, life-changing for me, life-changing, work-changing for me, to check the assumptions of what would happen if I just said, well, I don't need to be at this meeting, and try to just not go. And there's a last reason why this is a huge problem, that we're not thinking at work, that we are waiting to be told what to do. It simply makes us unhappy. Because we know from Daniel Pink, it's autonomy, mastery, and purpose that motivates us. And learned helplessness is the exact opposite of autonomy. And I know it makes us unhappy, but there's even research to back this up that links learned helplessness to anxiety and depression. And this kind of thinking is contagious. There's a ripple effect if we let this get into our teams, because then it will permeate organizations and you get a culture where people just sit back waiting to be told what to do. So the last few years have brought us to a place where there's increased learned helplessness, there are more mental health issues, there's a loss of autonomy, and there's less creativity and innovation. We need to do something. Let me start with what we have already done. The concept of wellness at work has taken off. So the last 5 years have seen a huge focus on wellness, on mental health, and organizations doing something, which is great. We have mental health days. We have yoga, meditation, mindfulness at work. I know a New Zealand agency that is allowing people to take unlimited mental health days for no reason. Just if you feel you need it, we want you to be in a good place, just take a mental health day. I don't know, do any of you have something similar at work? Great if you could type in the chat what your organization does. And those are all amazing things that organizations do for us. And I'm all for mental health days and recovery. But there's a flip side. There's a flip side to it, because while it has a really positive contribution to work-life balance, I think it has also created a culture of entitlement. The unlimited health days I've seen is you go to work in the morning and Slack pops up and there's just going pling, 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 mental health day, mental health day, mental health day. And people seem to be taking time off at the first sign of stress. And that's a problem, because first of all, it's bad for them. They don't develop any coping mechanisms if they just take time off. And secondly, it's a problem for their teammates if people just at the first sign of stress go, oof, need to have the day off. They're leaving their teammates with the slack to pick up. And I think our organizations are currently in a problematic space because we have swung a bit too far. We're bringing our whole selves to work, and we're looking to find friendship at work and a social life. And we expect to have a one-on-one with our manager once a week where we get to vent. It's almost like a therapy session. And sometimes we forget that we're actually here to work and it's a business. Recently talked to a New Zealand recruiter who said, well, people expect to come to the office max 2 days a week, can't be Monday or Friday, and also they need to pick up the kids at 3. It's not necessarily a bad thing that this happens, but it has become the expectation. And I think this entitlement has gone a bit too far. One leader put it absolutely beautiful, I think, that we have created a culture of entitlement and a huge dependency. And she said, the workplace is being considered as the 1950s husband would have been, there to cater to all our needs: emotional security, economic security, protection and freedom from being challenged. So I think we're placing simply way too much weight on what we expect from our organizations. And there's some consequences for that. First of all, for our leaders. It's exhausting. It's exhausting to them. They all told me it is super exhausting and they are about to be burned out because they're providing all this time, all these responsibilities, acting like the 1950s husbands. As one of them said, like, people seem to forget that we are people too. And if we as people have started to act like the 1950s housewife, expecting to be told what to do, expecting for other people to take care of us and provide solutions, that gets us to give up what we've been fighting for 20 years, that autonomy and freedom and agency. So I think we're doing a disservice to all of us, and there's something really dangerous going on that's a threat to our ways of working. So I want to make a rallying cry for change and say that we, like the women of the 1950s, need to emancipate ourselves. And we need to take back our responsibility, our autonomy, and our independence. And rallying cries for change are always very, very amazing. And they are a bit useless if they're not followed by what are we going to do next? So I want to dive into that. How are we going to do that? I wonder how many of you are sitting here thinking, yeah, she's going to tell us exactly what to do. I won't. What I will is give you 3 guidelines that I think are really important. And the number one is to remember that resilience comes from doing hard things. And when I say resilience, it's not as simple as saying, well, just toughen up, suck it up. We're smarter than that. But resilience is the ability to bounce back from adversity, the ability to adapt to changing circumstances and win. And a bit like a muscle, it needs to be trained to be strengthened over time. And if we don't use it, we're going to lose it. There's research in that, and a lot of that comes from studying athletes. And I'm a former elite athlete, so this is very close to my heart. So I love that psychologists and neurologists have started to focus their research on sports and athletes. And they're treating elite athletes as case studies to make useful generalizations about resilience. One of my favorite pieces of research is Angela Duckworth in her book Grit, where she proves that all elite athletes have gone through adversity. None of the elite athletes have ever achieved the level they have achieved without going through adversity. So basically, no adversity means no resilience, means no success on the elite level. And there's more research to back this up. There's Matt Fitzgerald, who I think many of us are familiar with. He now took the next step from Angela Duckworth's research about how necessary adversity is. He looked into, and how do they actually do that? And he did research into athletes of how they overcame adversity. And even though their individual stories were quite different, he found out that they all used the same basic framework for being resilient. And it's a 3-step model. The first step is just accepting reality, acknowledging the situation as it is. No denial, no avoidance, no ignoring, and no pretending it's any better than it is. Just stare it in the face and accept it. The next step is addressing reality, taking proactive measures to deal with it. That means adjusting strategy, changing your approach, and even your mindset. It's basically making the best out of a situation you have accepted. Then there's the third step, which is embracing reality. It's the final step. And that goes beyond acceptance and then action. It's wholeheartedly embracing the challenge. And that means a deeper level of engagement, even enjoyment of the struggle, turning this into an opportunity for growth and excellence, not just coping, but a thriving because of it. And I think this is a really good framework to take from the world of sports into the world of work. I look at it for AI, for example. Accepting reality, accepting that AI is going to change our jobs and our workplaces and our societies. We don't know exactly how, but it is. And we address it by learning about it, by being curious about it, being open-minded, and reflecting on consequences, potential consequences such as bias and changes in society. And the last step is embracing it, but integrating it into our work. Just as an example for how to apply a framework like this at our work. My point is, resilience and happiness don't come from being taken care of and being treated like a 1950s housewife. They come from successfully doing hard things, from overcoming adversity. And I've just given you a framework for doing this. Accept, address, embrace reality. And I highly recommend to apply it to work, to life. My suggestion is to do 3 hard things every day. If you're at work, question assumptions like, why am I doing this ticket? Why am I going to this meeting? And remember that autonomy and agency require competence to be allowed to do that. So every day, make sure you learn something, you upskill yourself. And if you're thinking, well, my company doesn't provide for enough training, well, you can address this by go to a library, buy books, go on YouTube, seek out experts, go to conferences, talk to people. And in general, just make sure that you surround yourself with people who are knowledgeable and maybe are smarter and better than you to learn from them. That's my first tip. Second one is, I think there's a problem in our relationships because a 1950s husband and wife relationship, being told what to do, being taken care of, is not an equal relationship. So I encourage you to assess your relationships at work, one by one, every single one. Is it equal? Yes or no? And by that, I don't mean abolishing formal hierarchy. There's nothing wrong with formal hierarchy. I'm talking about separating a role from a person. I think we were like really, really good at this during COVID. We were so good at seeing our leaders as people. We saw their dogs having a barking fit, and we saw their children walk through the street, and we saw them as people. And we have lost that. We seem to have forgotten that. And I think we need to go back to separating the role from the person and fixing our relationships with our leaders. And I have again found a framework that I've been that's been working away in my head for quite a while. That's also quite old. It's Robert Kelly, and it comes from the 1960s. And he talks about how to change about behaviors. and he calls it behaviors of star followers. That's super old-fashioned language. Nowadays, we would call it effective team players. And those effective team players, he's looked into two main behavioral axes, two main behavioral categories. And one is critical independent thinking, and the other one is the level of activity versus passivity. And before I go on, you will all see boxes here. And normally when I introduce this, people go, whoa, I don't want to be put in a box. I'm not putting people in boxes. My little boxes, not putting them there. Those lines, you can move around into boxes. Also, they are context dependent. It's not a personality type. It is something that is in a certain situation, we behave in a certain way, and it's a sign of our relationships. So think about that before you go, whoa, it's a box. So back to the boxes. The number one box is the type of player, the type of team player you want to work with. He also calls them the star follower. Those are the effective players, or the champs. They have high critical independent thinking, and they're very active. They put forward their own views while staying focused on what the organization needs. They're not afraid of conflict and taking risk, and they're good at coping with change. And lastly, they're consistent in their behavior towards all people, meaning they're not being dicks to people who are below them in the hierarchy, and they're not sucking up to people above them. They're consistent in their behavior. And the next type is the conformist players. They're the yes people. They're very active, but they're not dependent. They're not independent thinkers. They are enthusiastic enough, but they are in the category of, tell me what to do. I don't want to think. I'm not in a headspace to, I don't have the willingness to think for myself. They don't question orders. They avoid conflict, and they'll be very, very loyal to their bosses. They're still not thinking for themselves. And quite similar are the passive players. They're also maybe slightly disrespectfully called sheep. It was Robert Kelly, by the way, calling them sheep, not me. And they are quite similar in that they are not thinking. They're not critical thinkers, but they're also passive. So they have no initiative or show any sense of responsibility, and they just perform the tasks given to them and stop. And I think those are the ones that we are facing at the moment with people who are too stressed with life to behave in any other way. Again, it's not a personality thing, it's context dependent. And I think context are pushing many of us into the passive player, conformist players categories. And just for completeness, there's the alienated player. People who can think for themselves, and they do. And but they're not actively supporting the organization. They're quite cynical, they have seen too much, they're pretty toxic, they're negative, and but they are very rarely opposing the leader. So you can still think they're the snipers in the background. But I do think the main problem that we are facing right now is the passive players and the yes people. So, and what we need to do about that is, I think, move ourselves, if we find ourselves in one of those other quadrants, to the effective player quadrant. So what I'd like everyone to do, and I've done myself, and I'm still doing myself, is assessing my relationships at work. Are those relationships, is the relationship constructive and equal? And if not, which quadrant am I in, or is the other person in? And what do I need to do to change it? How have I contributed to this relationship? And what needs to happen next? What kind of conversation of thinking needs to happen next to get us into a relationship where we are more equal and more effective star players? And here's a message for all leaders. And whether you're a leader formally or informally, give people space. Give them the space to be effective players and the space to develop resilience by not doing everything for them, by not telling them what to do all the time. Allow them to succeed by giving them space. And I loved Michael Stanier's idea of leaders not taking care of everything, but killing the advice monster. I don't know if you have met the advice monster. I have it, and I think I actually know every single one of you if one's sitting right there on your right shoulder. The advice monster is that little thing that sits there and someone comes to you and they vent or they tell you about their problem and it pops up and goes like, I know what to do. And you just want to tell them, right, what you need to do is blah, 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 blah. Stop. Because it's not really helpful for people. And you need to kill it. Because if we let it talk, we are doing people a disservice. We're not giving them any space to develop resilience. So what we need to do as leaders is kill the advice monster and instead ask questions. What's the real challenge here? What else? What do you want? What do you want from me? What do you want out of this conversation? And then listen to the answer. So I believe facing this new reality that we need to deal with by accepting it, addressing it, and then embracing it to grow and thrive. We need to embrace agility, true agility, mental agility, personal agility, and organizational agility. Nobody knows what the new ways of working are going to look like. But I believe they need to be agile, and we need to figure it out by running small experiments, getting feedback, and adjusting. And we need to figure it out together as a team, people and leaders. Us together with our leaders and people who report to us or not. It doesn't matter about the reporting lines, but we need to figure it out together. And I said in the beginning, I'd like to ask you a favor. So I'd like to invite you to start the conversations, to go out to your organizations and your workplaces and observe what symptoms do you see. Make a plan what to do about it, small experiments, and then please share the experiments and the results because we're all figuring this out together and we need to know what each other are doing to progress collectively. So thank you. I'll leave you with a little cheat sheet of the things that I think you should totally do. Take a screenshot, memorize it immediately, but this will be my advice. Thanks.
Thank you, Sandy. Amazing. We're so lucky that we got to hear this, right? And I don't know about you, but I mean, so much resonated with me in my organization. And yeah, that advice monster, I actually developed a workshop about that. So we're tackling that program now at ANZ. So thank you so much. Now, team, it's time for questions. I see my friend Peter on the line. Let's see. I know, Sandy, you have control here, but
Yep.
are you going to share the slides? We have recorded this, so we're gonna share the recording. I'm just trying to see what questions we have. Guys, come off mute and ask your questions, eh?
Also, yes,
or feedback, right?
I will share the slides. I'll just send them to Beth and she can.
Great. Yeah, and someone just wants you to share that last screen again. I think they want to take a photo. I'm guilty of that. I've taken some photos as well. So Just some good reminders. Now, team, do we have any questions for Sandy? We have about 20 minutes left, so there's plenty of time, or some feedback, some things you're trying at your organization.
I have a comment, if I may.
Go on, Kerry.
Hi, Sandy. It's Kerry here. Thanks so much. It was so exciting to see you speaking. And yeah, I missed you in Auckland the other day. Hey, just earlier on in your talk, you said you're not a leader. I want to challenge you on that, because you absolutely are a leader. I think maybe you meant you're not in a traditional leadership position, but that's my challenge to you. You are a leader. Boy, I follow you.
Yeah, what could possibly go wrong, Kerry? But thanks.
Nice. I also had that comment, so that's a good one. Who else? Come off mute, team. Comments, questions?
Hey, Sandy, thanks for that. That was great. I am really curious around the intersection between, there are things that are good for your mental health and, let's say, like connection at work, but like you say, not stopping people from being resilient. Do you kind of determine that there's like things that are good for connection, bad for resilience, and then some that are sort of either or?
I think it's really hard to be black and white here. And I think when we started out, we did the right thing. There was not enough about connection in the workplace. There was not enough about being able to take a mental health day. There was simply nothing or not enough. And we pushed to get more of it. And that was the right thing to do. And like everything, like I think there's now in some areas has gone too far. So it's about getting you go too far one way, then you go too far the other way, and then hopefully you find a good middle ground that works. And I know I'm like totally not answering your question because I can't, because I don't think it's that black and white.
Nice. Thanks, Tristan. Now you have your hand up, but I can't see the name. Sorry. Go ahead.
Sorry. Oh, morning, guys. Sorry, this is Mahesh. Sandy, I just want to say, great presentation. A lot of it resonated with me as well. And I undertook a St. John's mental health course a few years ago because I thought it would help me recognize signs of stress, because people don't often put their hand up. You have to, they're very forthcoming, and mental health and how people portray that has been I've been in New Zealand for 14 years, and I've certainly seen it go from John Kerwin talking about adverts to it becoming a real industry, a little bit like health and safety has become. But people are taking it seriously because there's severe impacts, not just on people's well-being, but the outputs and the outcomes they're looking for within organizations. I was just going to ask you, from all these people that you'd interviewed, these leaders, what strategies have they been using? And has there been any degree of success?
They have introduced most of those measures I have talked about, like giving people mental health days, offering conversations. Some people have counsellors at work, and there's some success. But what I believe is looking at the mental health stats shows that they're not solving the problem. Like, even if we get it totally right in organization, there's something that's still going wrong because there's still a huge anxiety. People are not coping. And there might be things that are working, some are not working so well. I think we're overdoing it. And we're placing too much weight on what your employer needs to do versus what people who are not your employer need to do, and what you need to do yourself.
We have, that's interesting. We've got like a daily check-in, like a mood setting kind of Teams chat for our area where we sit. And I think by people being more honest and open with their mental health struggle, where they are, the team, not so much the employer, but the team support each other. And we rally together around certain people that we can tell are struggling a little bit, but we're not, people are still coming into work. They're not taking mental health days willy-nilly. And I'm not suggesting people are winging it, but there's always going to be, as a Yorkshire lad, there's always going to be a bit of cynicism there where people sort of swing the lead, but that's just part and parcel of life, really. But I think you've got to accept people have got different, that different levels of the spectrum of mental health, from positive to negative. We flip back and forth on a daily basis, but it's how we actually cope. Is that resilience? So we were sent recently, or were offered the opportunity to go on a resilience course, and the difference between resilience and stress. Where stress is internal, and resilience is coping with your, how you actually, as you've described it, how you deal with the situation. So this is really quite timely. So the course was about a month ago. So I just really like the content and interest to see where this goes, because it's can't ignore it. We've just got to accept it and deal with it.
Thank you. And
Right.
the solution.
Thanks. Hey, so we have Chris with his hand up, my friend. I haven't seen you in ages. And then we're going to ask Edwin in the chat, and then my other friend Pete, who I haven't seen in ages too. So Chris, go ahead and ask your question, please.
Thank you. Yeah, good to see you, Beth, and good to see you again, Sandy. Yes, so I was just reflecting, and I wonder if we're in a kind of maybe an unhealthy sort of a cycle where, the leadership won't give teams the agency, or the autonomy, and sometimes that's with good reason. Like you say, the teams just aren't thinking. But I remember you came to talk to us, and you'd done a holacracy implementation down in Wellington, and you talked about that oh shit moment, where a team like connects with reality, and it's like, this is real, this is actual money. But leadership aren't giving teams that opportunity, and so teams aren't developing the capability. So leaderships don't give them the opportunity, so they don't develop the capability. So we're in this cycle, and probably could be broken by coaches, squads, or leadership. But maybe there's a greater sort of back challenge back to leadership, and the people you've spoken to say, well, the greatest risk of all is don't take a risk. So is there a case for back challenging leadership to have a little bit of faith, even though it may seem that that faith could be misplaced?
Absolutely. And I think this is absolutely a two-way street. Leaders having some faith and allowing for some freedom, and people also stepping up when they do get the freedom and not sit back, tell me what to do. So I agree that there is a cycle going on. And I believe this is why I believe this is a shared problem, which no group can solve on their own. There needs to be communication, negotiation, and a shared approach to accepting that this is happening, acknowledging the problem, and then finding a shared way to address it as the only way as a good way forward, I believe.
Brilliant. Thanks. Okay, Edwin, let's see. What do you think is a good beginning step approach to create space for thinking in leadership and in development teams? I know, right?
Yeah.
No pressure.
No pressure.
What do you tell leaders? What is that beginning step for leaders?
I think it is very, I'm going to play the question back in a moment too. I think it's very context dependent where you are at and where your team is at. But when I coach teams, my mental model is rock the boat without sinking the ship. So I try to create situations where I let people make mistakes, but not mistakes that are so big that they endanger the entire operation.
Right.
And creating small spaces for people to work in to succeed, I think works. And then making those spaces bigger and bigger as you go. In terms of concrete things, I would start as a leader in my conversations with people by killing that advice monster and not telling people what they could do, just giving them the space. And I've learned the ask a question, or they ask me a question, and then shut up, Sandy, and let them come to a conclusion. It's amazing what people figure out that I thought I had the only solution to.
Nice. And I think, Peter, you're going to wrap us up with the last question because we're almost at time. So, hi, good to see you.
Good to see you, Beth. Thank you, Sandy. Thank you so much for sharing. It's just every time I hear I'll share something with you all. Every time I hear the word resilience, I get taken back to my days of being in one of Auckland's legacy councils just prior to the super city transition, so pre sort of 2010, to give you some context. And as we went into that change, we were all offered resiliency training. And I said, no, thank you. And HR were like, oh, you don't want it. And I said, no. So I got a visit from HR and they said, Peter, why don't you want it? And I said, well, why are we assuming this change is bad? You're sort of saying to me, Peter, you need this training because something's going to happen to you that needs you to be resilient, and therefore it's something that's not going to be good. And I said, well, can I have the opposite? Can I have the opportunity training? Because what might happen might actually be good for me, and I want to grab the opportunities. So every time I hear the word, I just get taken back to that time where, because a change was going to occur, a very large change, there was an assumption that it was going to be a bad change. And I think that's something we can sometimes get into as a bit of a trap. And actually it was okay in the end, looking back on it. So yeah, I thought I'd just share that in relation to the word resilience.
That's awesome. Can I ask for a last favor?
Yes.
I'm going to leave my email address in the chat, and because I don't want to keep you back for ages, but I really do want to hear feedback, which parts resonated, which parts didn't. Yeah, anything that pops into your mind, that'd be really awesome, so I can iterate on that talk.
Oh, lovely. Yeah, look, and she really means it. Okay. And actually being someone who's done some talks and like, we get our guinea pig groups together. We only get better together, right? And Sandy is representing Kiwis everywhere with her speaking engagement. So let's give her that feedback. Feedback is a gift that we hate to open, but when we ask for it, we mean it. Okay. So thank you, Sandy. Team, if there's any last questions, anything else before we wrap up? Our next meetup will be in November. We're still working out the date, so stay tuned for that. But yeah, Sandy, we really appreciate it. And thank you everyone for taking some time out of your morning to join us. And we'll see you next time.
Thanks so much, Sandy and Beth. Thank you.
All right.
Thank you,
Thanks,
Sandy.
team. See ya.
Bye-bye.